Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Anuradha Dayal-Gulati, who's here to share with us her new book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots. Release the family patterns that hold you back. So Anu is an energy practitioner and transformational coach with a PhD in economics. After 15 years in finance and academia, she began a new path of helping people release their past and reclaim their power. She's trained in flower essence therapy and family constellation therapy as well. So welcome to the show, Anuradha Dayal-Gulati.
Thank you, Marianne. It's great to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Oh, goodness. I don't think I really planned to write this book. But when I fell into ancestral healing work and I was training, I would go to Rhode Island and I would come back and I would just write and write and write. I didn't even know what I was writing, but I think it was my way of processing. And I think everything I had been struggling with ever since I came to the US that I had no words for, I think there were these gears turning in my head, and the language and the framework, all of that was coming together. And I think it was over a period of a few years that I started to realize, oh, this is a book, but I didn't originally intend to write a book. I wasn't thinking of that. It just happened that way.
And usually really good books come together that way. It's interesting because I think you are really kind of diving into a question that a lot of people have when we talk about our family history. So how did you make this switch? Because I know this has also made a career change for you, right?
Yes. It's a complete career change. On one that I struggled with speaking about for a long time. But I think at some level, it was meant to happen, even though when it did, it happened in a very, very traumatic way. Because I had a health problem and I had to go into the ER. But, I thought, okay, I'm out. This is it. It's behind me. Got to get back to life as usual. But then one night out of nowhere, I had to go back in again. And I remember feeling kind of scared. Like, I don't know what's happening, what's going on. But I did come out of the ER a second time too. It was when I had to go in the third time that I started to feel this sense of despair sweeping over me. Like, I started to feel like, am I really going to get okay? And I could see the doctors' faces and I could see like they didn't really know what was going on. But that was very scary. But I had a very good friend and she was into alternative healing. And she came to see me in the hospital and she held my hand. And she looked at me and she said, how many times are you going to go through this? When are you going to try something new? What is it going to take for you to try something new? And I feel like her words, even today, they sort of stay with me. And I realized like I needed to do something different. I needed to change the trajectory of my life. And I literally willed myself out of the hospital. And I started to look at different alternative ways of healing. So I found this amazing Chinese medicine doctor and I discovered flower essences. And those were the two things that saved my health and changed my life. But I think even more importantly, this whole incident made me realize how important hope is in our life. And I felt like I had really lost hope. So as I started to get better, as I started to go on this healing journey, I discovered that what I really wanted to do was to help people realize that they were never powerless. Like, you are never powerless. You can create change. You can bring about change in your life. And that sort of became my mission. But it kind of happened in a very circular way.
Well, it sounds like you have a very good friend that would prompt those kind of questions within yourself. And I know you talk about ancestral roots. So, what are those?
In a lot of traditions, like in the Eastern traditions and Native American traditions, your ancestors are not just your parents and grandparents, but they include those who came up to 7 generations before you. And if there is something unresolved in those generations before you, we come in as their descendants and we take on a piece of what is unresolved to heal it. And when we do that, that is what the ancestral healing work that we sort of are almost born to undertake. This is what we really do. And that's what starts the journey. And in the process, I think we have to let go. Ancestral healing really happens when we let go of the feeling that we're a victim of what came before us. That's when healing really happens. And that's part of the process.
And so, to kind of piggyback on this, you also talk about transgenerational patterns. So, how do we identify those and what do those look like?
So, the transgenerational pattern is how ancestral energy makes its presence felt. And listeners, I would ask them the questions, like I would ask a question, do you feel that there are patterns that repeat in your life? Like, do you find yourself in similar kind of relationships again and again? Do you find yourself with the same kind of bosses, the same kind of coworkers, feeling like I've started another project that's failing yet again? Is there this feeling like this is happening to me again and again? Or is there a theme in your family that you can say, this pattern runs in my family? Do you have this sense of, I've been trying to have a relationship. I've been trying to have financial success, professional success, a career goal. And no matter how hard I work, it seems out of reach. It's as if I'm stuck. Then that problem may not have originated with you. It may have originated before you. That's another way an ancestral energy makes its presence felt. And one thing I would like to point out is I listen to, some of my clients who feel like they're the ones doing the repair work in their family. And there's a sense of frustration about it. There's a sense of like anger about it. But actually, they're the ones who've been called to step in to do the healing work. So it's really such a sacred task. And when they do that repair work, they not only heal themselves, they heal those who came before, as well as those who are going to come after, because we are the ancestors of those who are going to come after us. And as you do the healing work, you heal the world. You heal that space and the space that you were born to heal. It's not just your lineage. You actually end up doing bigger work than you imagined was ever possible.
I really love how your book talks about the family energy field, and you can really see how different traits are inherited from one family generation to another. And we talk about our parents, maybe sometimes they don't, they're not really well equipped with, maybe they get angry really quickly or whatever the deal is. And that's probably an indication of what their parents were like and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think now we are getting more familiar with the use of trauma in sort of the current lexicon or the way in which we speak. And trauma is not always like, big trauma. Sometimes it's little trauma. Sometimes it's childhood bullying. Sometimes it's just being invisible in a family of multiple children. It's in many, many ways. But one of the things that happens with trauma is it's not love that's lost. It's the expression of love that gets lost in the family, how love is expressed. And so getting to that space of recognizing that this is an expression of trauma because there is an unprocessed story there, then you can start to reclaim your power to heal. to recognize that, my parents, my mother, my father, my grandparents were such and such because they couldn't process what they had to go through. And this is how it comes out. So you start to like detach a little bit and let go of expectations. And that releases the feeling of victimhood.
I've often heard families that have like a repetition, and you talk about this in your book, they call it like a family curse. And I'd love for you to explain what that looks like, because I've heard people talk about it, but maybe they're not really sure what's going on.
Yeah. So it can sometimes, I think, it shows up in marriages that don't work. It shows up in, children that feel uncared for in the family, and not just with one family, like if there are 6 or 7 siblings, it may not be just with one sibling's children. It can be with multiple siblings' kids. And this feeling of being uncared for. There's also another way in which it can show up is marriages don't happen. Another way is where there's just like a financial ceiling. Like, it's not just that, it's not even that money is not enough. Like they can, enough varies for every individual, but just that there's always like this professional hardship, like the career never takes off. The financial success related to it never takes off. So these are sort of patterns that happen. And underlying this pattern is usually something ancestral.
It's not as some people would want to call it like a family curse. It's something they really have to work through.
Yes. And I think when we say curse, there is this feeling like I'm powerless about it. But anytime we work with the ancestral energy field, anytime we honor, acknowledge, remember the ancestors, we start to shift this energy. Because one way to think about it is that the ancestors, their souls have to evolve. So when their souls are, sort of stuck in this kind of earth plane, they want to make amends for what they've done, for things that have happened, but they don't really have the capacity to do it. We, as their descendants, we are the ones who have the capacity to create change. So that's one of the reasons why their energies hang around us. But when we start to create the change, when we start to shift that energy, then they are able to sort of lift up and become more helpful, because we are doing the work that they couldn't do or couldn't have done or should have done, or, just weren't able to. And I think it's also really important to recognize that, in a lot of, Alberto Villoldo, who's a Cuban medical anthropologist, he talked about this. He said, in the Western tradition, we assumed that ancestor worship was worshiping the ancestors. But actually, even what I've come to realize in our traditions and the Indian traditions, it's not about worshiping your ancestors. You're not praying to your ancestors. You're praying for your ancestors. It's a big difference, because when you're praying for them to move up, out of the negative emotion, out of being stuck in like sort of regret and guilt and shame and all of that, and just moving out into higher realms. Then they can sort of be more helpful and powerful and start to bless us, who are their living descendants. Otherwise, we sort of stay trapped in their energies.
I often hear of parents that don't want to be like their parents. Maybe their parents have been just overly, not really in control of their emotions in healthy ways. And so you hear that the next generation's making a conscious effort to be more involved in how they're feeling and with their emotions. So how big a part do emotions really play in all this?
I think this is such a wonderful point you've raised, Marianne, because I think emotions are sort of central to this. The reason we feel the burden of our ancestral patterns is because we feel. If we didn't feel, we wouldn't really, we wouldn't like feel like we needed to do anything about it. And we've sort of grown up with the notion that we're kind of rational beings who have emotions. But if we flipped it and say, we really are emotional beings who rationalize, then we can start to see that emotions is how the ancestral world is communicating with us. And emotions, cause us to react. So when you're talking about being intentional, you're actually being intentional about how you choose to respond. And simply that choice is every moment of choice you make is a moment of power, is a moment of reclaiming your power in a good way. And that gives you the ability to create transformation. Because you look at the story of, this was the story of my parents, this was the story of my family, but I'm choosing intentionally to be different. I think there's another part to this, which is to recognize that, that was my parental story. And I can see their story. I choose not to be a part of it. But, maybe there's a part of me that can understand what they went through, even if I don't fully agree with it. But I can see why they could have been that way. And that is also like, it has a healing component to it. Because otherwise we're holding on to that resentment and anger. Like, I want to be different, but, there's a lot of, then again, there's an emotion that gets passed down, the emotions of anger and resentment, blame. So releasing those emotions also becomes important.
It seems that people have these negative emotions that we've been talking about, but is there also positive emotions that affect them in a transgenerational process?
Yeah, I think we don't really notice the benefits we receive from one generation to the next. We take it for granted. Our brains are wired at some level for negativity, so we sort of miss all the little things that we receive, whether it's a roof over our heads, whether it's, a talent, a skill, a scientific mind, an artistic mind, an education, a way of doing jigsaw puzzles, whatever it is, we miss some of the things that we receive because we just take it for granted. And we notice what we didn't receive or what we wanted, but we feel like we didn't get. So that's when we start to notice the discrepancy. But what we do receive is, often our ancestral blessings. And that's why gratitude is such a game changer, because gratitude shifts the energy of what we're carrying. It allows us to receive, to see what we have received and what we can continue to receive.
In your book, and you mentioned this earlier, you talk about flower essence. So how does that play a part in all this?
The longest healing journey is from the head to the heart, I think, because we can intellectually, rationalize anything, whether it is our family story, whether it is our parents, our grandparents. We can rationalize what, happened, or what we feel is how we can rationalize how we feel. But the real healing happens when we're able to open our hearts and accept things as they are without expectation. And it's so hard to shift from the heart. And so I feel flower essences actually support that shifting. So we can think of flower essences as medicine from Mother Nature. And for thousands of years, dew was considered to have a very healing property. But, clearly it's sort of challenging to collect enough dew. So in the 1930s, there was a British surgeon, Dr. Bach, and he found a way of recreating the healing property of dew and also stabilizing it. So he would create these wildflower infusions in spring water and preserve the water with brandy. And that's what became flower essences. And, at the University of Glasgow, there were researchers who identified 4 primary emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. And a lot of times we're cycling in three emotions: fear, anger, sadness. So what Dr. Bach did is he, like fear, there's several different kinds of fear. So with the flower essences, he identified the nuances of the emotions. And that's what helps shift the emotion. So then we can actually start to heal from the heart, because that's where the real healing happens, from the level of the heart. And flower essences, taking them is like drinking possibility for your life. That's what they really are. The nectar of possibility.
I know we all love that. We love possibility. Where can we make these changes, and how can we look at ourselves and our past and our generations differently? And I know you also talk about family constellations, and I'd love for you to share about that as well. I found that to be fascinating.
Yes, family constellations is another sort of way into opening of the heart. Because when you're struggling with a problem in your family and you feel like you're not seeing a way out, what happens is, because the family is seen as an energy field, so it's, through time and space it exists. So a family constellation is typically done in a group setting, and there's a space in the center, which is open for the group process. And a client who might come in with a problem will invite somebody to represent them, and also invite other people to represent members of their family. So because family is this energy field, the people who step inside the circle start to take on the emotions, expressions of the family members who might be alive or may not be alive. It's, what Rupert Sheldrake called the morphic field. We somehow step into this field and are able to access it, this collective field. And so the client is given a window of insight into what could have caused the feelings or the trauma that they're facing. And that, is like a heart opening that happens. It's an insight, not so much at the level of the intellect, but a level of the opening of the heart. There's a sort of peace, acceptance, understanding, insight, wisdom that comes from that process. And I think it's, it takes time for that integration to happen, but it starts right then. The integration can be very deep, almost instantly, or it plays out over time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you going over that and explaining that for us. There tend to be patterns that most people get stuck with as they start this process.
There's a lot of research that says relationships matter. They influence the quality of your life, your health, your happiness. And it is this disconnection from ourselves that then causes us to feel the sense of disharmony and disconnection in our relationships. And a lot of times, the disconnection that we start to experience usually happens at the level of the mother and the father. There's something in the parenting, typically in the mother parenting, that causes the disconnection to happen. And it doesn't help that society is always telling us, your emotions are not important. So it tells us, don't bring your emotions to work. You feel too much. You're too sensitive. You're too emotional. You should have got over it. So instead of our emotions being a compass that take us in the direction of healing, they become something we suppress. And the more we disconnect or suppress our emotions, the more we disconnect from ourselves. And all human mothers and fathers are flawed. But the idea is, can we connect with the sort of universal mothering energy? And Mother Earth is kind of that universal mothering energy. A lot of traditions also had this universal mothering energy, but we sort of disconnected from it. I think now more and more, there's a resurgence of interest in the divine feminine and bringing that back in. And when you tap into that mothering energy, it allows you to accept, your own human flaws, your own human challenges, even your parental human flaws and challenges. It becomes much easier. And I think it's nice to see that shift has started to happen.
I was really impressed in your book. You talk about how our emotions are not just messengers of our pain, they're messengers from our family field. And it's like, ooh, well, then whose emotions are we carrying?
Yes, yes. Whose emotions are we carrying? That is so true. And this feeling of disconnection that we have from ourselves is reflected in all of the emotions, we feel, like the sadness, the anger, when we can't, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling of anxiety, is that disconnection from ourselves. And that disconnection also began before us. If our parents went through any kind of trauma, they are carrying that disconnection. And it can express itself in, over control of the child, disconnection from the child, and invalidation of the child. But it's just this disconnection that is being carried down the lineage from one generation to the next.
Now, does karma play any part in all of this?
So I think in the Eastern tradition, we think of karma we think of our individual karma as a soul karma, as what we came to heal in this lifetime. And then your family karma is the family in which you came to heal it. And so the two things sort of interact, which gives you, what is your purpose in life? Why are you here? What did you come to do? What did you come to heal? So when it sort of interacts together, you kind of get what you were born for. I think it's always a little hard to say, did I really choose this? But when you start to think of karma as a way of, like, here's how I reclaim my power, here's how I choose differently, then it sort of becomes much more empowering, is the word I'm looking for. That's, you don't feel so much like a victim. You start to say, you know what, I can do something about this. I can start to release these projections. I'd love to share a story if I can.
Yes, please.
So I had this young girl who came to me, and she was in second year of law school, and she dropped out of law school, and it was causing this huge rift with her parents because they didn't understand why she needed to drop out. They thought it was because of the relationship she was in. And so it just led to this big rupture. When I started working with her, we discovered that her mother had dropped out of college as well. She was a very highly gifted student, but had eloped, gotten pregnant, dropped out of college. And so when she saw her daughter repeating this, she was really upset. So the daughter says, well, I don't know. I don't know if this is really a pattern. Like, I don't see why me? What does it have to do with me? Well, when we look back one more generation, her maternal grandmother was in medical school, dropped out of medical school to get married, a man of her choice, then got divorced, and then went back to medical school. So in every generation, there was this pattern of like men, women, education, and choices. And so working with her, she took flower essences to understand what is it that she really wanted? What did she want to do? Did she want to go back to school? Did she want to drop out? What did she really want? How could she find that internal compass of what she wanted? And at the same time, recognize this was a transgenerational wound that she had come in to repair. And I'm really happy to say that with the flower essences, she did decide that she wanted to go back to school. And that was a choice she was making for herself from that place inside of her. So it was like a healing of what had happened in all the generations before. So it was really wonderful to see. And of course, her relationship with her parents and everything healed. But she went back from this great sense of empowerment. Like, this is who I am and this is what I want to do, which I thought was wonderful. It really shows the power of working with your ancestral energy field, as well as recognizing what you have come to do and what you need to change.
So you mentioned using flower essences. So how do we know which ones to use and if they're working?
Often, so in the book, I have 10 frequently used flower essences that come up. I see a lot. And 2 of them actually are holly and willow. There are others, but those two I find very often are needed. Holly is for all of the issues that come up with miscommunication, with anger, with jealousy, with sort of, all of those emotions. And willow is for bitterness. It's when we just feel we simmer. We can't express, but we simmer. So willow and holly are wonderful, but a lot of times I've seen when the flower essences work so gently that it almost feels like nothing is happening, but there is a shift in your response. Instead of being reactive, my clients find they are responsive, and it's, many people find that, and they tend to feel calmer. They tend to feel less anxious. They tend to feel as if something inside of them is sort of settled. So that's normally how people start to know that the essence is working, because it works so gently.
Is it possible for us to rewrite our parental story?
I think yes. And I think rewriting the parental story is when I hear, people tell me like, my mother needs to change. She needs to do this. Or I have been trying to fix my parents for so long. If we think about it, there are 252 mothers and fathers in 7 generations. So that's a lot of chapters that were written before we came on the scene. And we can't rewrite those chapters. But what we can do in rewriting the parental story, what we can do is release our expectation of them, especially if there's been something that is been hurtful or lingering, and just stop looking for the acknowledgement, for the praise, the validation, one of them saying, I'm sorry this happened. The moment we start to release those expectations, we can start to rewrite the parental story, because then we're no longer a victim in that story. We've reclaimed our power. So a lot of it has to do with releasing expectations. And that is a hard one to do. So using the flower essences support us in letting go of expectations and reclaiming your power. And as the moment you start to do that, you start to be able to rewrite the story, because it doesn't control you anymore.
You have a sentence in your book that really stuck with me, and it's unresolved trauma can overwhelm families, communities, and even countries for generation and keep getting passed down to each generation. And gosh, isn't that just a powerful statement? Because it really says a lot of what's happening.
Yeah. Yes. We're seeing so much of that. And I think the most pressing example is Ukraine, because all those little children that we saw images of earlier, having to leave, having to flee, having to be with their mothers, the fathers going on. This is going to continue in their psyche, not just for this generation, but for the next. And how do we really support that healing and the healing of the world, really, in so many different places? And I think that's kind of key to bringing about healing, at the level of the planet as a whole. That understanding, that compassion, that, it's time for us to live in peace, because underneath, we then give rise to these currents of rage that start to make their presence felt every now and then.
Is it important for us to honor our ancestors? And I would think that would be difficult for some people, especially if our ancestors were abusive or disempowering. I mean, how important is that?
It's always hard to start when, it's for them, especially the generations that we remember the most, maybe the generation just above us, which is our parental generation, or in, their relatives in that generation, or the generation above, that can be the most challenging. So it might be easier to start with the generations that came before them and to start, asking for those earlier generations to be at peace. And if that is even harder, what is sometimes easier is even to just start an altar in a home. And it doesn't have to be like a typical Eastern altar. Like, for instance, in India, almost every home has an altar. But these can be altars which, are to nature or to some universal sort of feeling of kindness or compassion. And just stopping at that place, maybe with putting some flowers, some incense, some little offering from nature. And then it becomes a place in your home where you stop and just pause with, acceptance or gratitude, or offer your, you can sit there and offer your sorrows and just ask for hope, ask for guidance, ask for blessing. And that starts to shift the energy, because coming home to ourselves has like 4 pillars. One is working with the ancestral realm. And if the immediate ancestors are problematic, going further back, or to people who might have supported you, who may not necessarily be your ancestors, but who have supported you. The second is working with your emotions and reconnecting with yourself. And there's so many therapies for that. It's not just flower essences, but it's journaling is a great one. Walking in nature is another one, because as we engage with Mother Earth, that's another component of what brings us home. And finally, building our spiritual connection, because all trauma can be seen as an invitation to building a connection with something bigger than ourselves. And that also gets lost. So it's an invitation to connect with something that might be bigger than us. Although we see the law of karma in operation, there's also grace in operation. And noticing grace, or the presence of grace, and starts to lift us a little bit and open us to sort of seeing things in a way that, yes, we are also being taken care of, even though it doesn't look like it. But we can start to notice the very small miracles or the small things that are happening. And slowly this expands our consciousness, because we are really shifting our perspective. Healing is a shifting of perspective.
Is it important for people to have a faith as they are working through this process? Or if they don't have a faith, is it something that they can work towards?
I think it depends on how faith is defined. A lot of people say that they're not religious, they're spiritual, because they don't want to go back to the way their faith was practiced or the way they were taught as children. So I think it's anything that appeals to you. And there's no judgment about, I think we get stuck in like, I don't want it this way, I don't want it that way, this is not right. But anything that appeals, if being in nature appeals to you, then that's perhaps where you start to see your own faith come in. It doesn't matter really where it is. And in the same way that I don't feel that there's only one way to expand your emotional range, it can be any way. Even exercise, or any form of exercise, is a way of expanding your emotional range. People find that running really lifts them up. So it's just anything that you do that lifts your spirit that expands your emotional range, because the higher emotions like sort of peace and contentment are all as a result of reconnection with ourselves. Even cooking whatever you like to eat or bake, there's ways of reconnecting with ourselves. That's what we really want.
In your book, you talk about connecting with Mother Earth. Is that something that we can do if we have a belief system that is more universal?
Yeah, I think, part of the reason we're struggling with global warming and everything else is that we no longer see the earth as sacred. It's just, something to be exploited. But the moment we recognize that we are part of earth and Mother Earth, and, she is the one really at the end feeding us, however we choose to eat. Ultimately, it's coming from Mother Nature. Then we can recognize that this is the most primal form of nurturing that we are receiving, and that we're disconnected from it. So just going there and starting that can also be tremendously healing. I think the other thing is, flower essences are also really, we think of flowers as the highest expression of nature in some ways. We give flowers when when we're grieving for someone, when we're loving someone, when we're expressing our affection, our appreciation, our celebration. So in some ways, we're already reconnecting connecting at a very primal level with the earth. So just recognizing that that's where we also need to restore connection, and seeing her as the ultimate mother of mothers, mother of fathers, like we can start to reconnect with ourselves. It's all about reconnecting with ourselves. However it's done, whether it's faith, whether it's Mother Earth, whatever shape or form it takes, that's what brings us back to wholeness.
In your book, you talk about how, we should get to a point where we can really honor ourselves in our lives. Do you find that people have difficulty with that?
I think so, because, all of the messages and all of the conditioning is about conforming, which is about forgetting ourselves. And reconnecting with ourselves is about stepping away from conformity. And that's hard and that's challenging. And actually, there's a very beautiful African proverb that says, when you cut your chains, you free yourself. When you cut your roots, you die. And I think it sort of shows the balancing act that we have to go on, where cutting our chains is like cutting the conditioning that we have been receiving, and cutting our roots is we tend to cut our roots rather than cut our conditioning. But in honoring our roots, we can just maybe make space for acceptance and letting go of expectations. Then we start to give ourselves the freedom to move forward. It's, at some level, it can be a challenging journey, but at some level, it just becomes so freeing, because you can start to let go of everything that's been holding you back, and you can start to create the life you want. And that's what we really want at the end, to sort of live life in a way that is joyful, fulfilling, rewarding, connecting. The more we connect with ourselves, the more we can connect with others from a space of, less expectation and more of just, you are who you are, and this is who I am. And, I can just be in the space without judgment or hurt or anger. It's tremendously freeing.
What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from your book?
I think it's so important to restore connection to yourself, and your emotions are the gateway to restoring connection to yourself. And maybe I can just give a small example of this, so that if you think of the emotion of jealousy and we say, oh my God, she's so jealous, like what, that's not good. But think of jealousy as, I really want something and I can't have it. or I really want something. I've tried to have it, but I couldn't have it. I failed. Or I really want something, but I don't know how to get it. So there's so many different emotions of sadness, emotions of bitterness, of fear, and just having that compassion for yourself, like underneath this feeling of jealousy or rage is like so much that I'm grieving for. And giving yourself that self-compassion, giving your space for recognizing the message behind it can allow you to step forward and reconnect with yourself and heal. And that's the first step in healing. An invitation, accepting the invitation to acknowledge what's underneath and calling for your attention. My website is called healyourancestral.roots.com. And on it, there's, a list of 10 flower essences that, anyone can download. And there's a document that says how to use them, how to create your own bottle of flower essences. And also the book is available wherever books are sold, on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or my publisher's website, innertraditions.com. So anywhere where books are sold, the book is available as well.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It was so good to talk with you.
Well, thank you, Anu. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots. Release the family patterns that hold you back. Heal Your Ancestral Roots is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it because we love supporting our indie bookstores. I'd like to take a moment and just say that we support the people of Ukraine. There are many ways to donate to help Ukraine during this very difficult time of need. I usually use the World Central Kitchen as a place that I like to donate. Choose one that works for you, people, animals. Everyone needs help. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
If not me, then who? This ethos is driving the Travis Manion Foundation to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to develop character in future generations. In 2007, Marine First Lieutenant Travis Manion was killed in Iraq while saving his wounded teammates. Travis's legacy lives on in the 5 words he spoke before leaving for his final deployment. If not me, then who? Guided by this mantra, veterans continue their service, developing strong relationships in the community, and thrive in their post-military lives. Visit TravisManion.org and ensure the character of our nation's heroes lives on in the next generation. If not me, then who?
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Do you have a book that you'd like to get out in the world, but you're just not sure how to do it? Hiring a professional makes all the difference. Visit mariannepastana.com and learn how your book can be elevated. Book your calendar with interviews and get people knowing about your message. Don't let your story be drowned out in the masses. Visit mariannepastana.com and hire the professionals. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.